Hi, my name's Christoph, and we've got loads to get through today. We're hoping to finish a little ahead of time. We're also trying to squeeze in an extra little break because catering will be hanging on just a little bit longer for some cookies and water. So one more incentive to keep me on time. Although Julia will be shooting glances at me if I am too slow. We thought we'd talk about Brexit a little earlier on, not to let people hanging for the good stuff until the very end of it. The advice that we're giving out to UK-based and rest of Europe-based organisations is to continue applying jointly for these cooperation projects. The vote to leave the EU is now 3 years ago, and over the last 3 years there has been no downturn in UK-led applications, no downturn in projects involving UK organisations. The collaboration UK, rest of Europe has remained strong and indicating a joint commitment to working together on arts, culture, heritage projects. So we're very much hoping that this is something that will continue. That's why we're advising everyone to still keep going, of course building in contingency for things that might happen, but as cooperation projects specifically are subject to any kind of changes, working with contingencies and having cooperation agreements is just standard good practice anyway. You do not need to be an EU member state to be part of Creative Europe, so I'm just going through a few key messages here and a few public service announcement reminders here. There are 41 countries, and we'll talk about those in a second, that are part of Creative Europe. The non-EU countries in the programme pay a membership fee to be part of Creative Europe. Erasmus Plus is also a programme where many more countries are part of, not just EU member states. As Julie mentioned and Caroline also said, the UK is one of the most partnered countries, and it is a country that is incredibly well represented in Creative Europe, and it's up there with the big 5 European countries. I will refer over the next 3 slides to our website, where there will be up-to-date guidelines on anything to do with Brexit and all that. So you'll see the next slide also says, have a look at the website. The plan is that there will be a deal of some kind, and that would include a transition period. A transition period would mean that the UK continues to pay into programs such as Erasmus Plus, Horizon 2020 and Creative Europe, and that things would continue as normal for organisations, for applicants, for beneficiaries, and that there would be no disruption to the UK's continued participation in this programme. And that would mean that applications can still be submitted until the end of the current programme, with projects running well beyond 2020. For example, if a project is awarded next year, and it can run for up to 4 years regardless. Again, do check our website for guidance and for updates on that. Should there be a no-deal scenario, there is still a possibility that the UK could be offered and agree to continued participation in Creative Europe. If this is not possible, there is what's called the government guarantee. Again, there's more on that on our website. That government guarantee essentially indemnifies UK beneficiaries financially for European funding that they would have been eligible to receive but would no longer be eligible to receive, because if the UK leaves the EU with no agreement regarding Creative Europe, the UK would be in effect an ineligible country, and for all of those who've worked with European funding, ineligible is not a good thing to be. So if that does happen, UK organisations could continue as an associate partner in existing cooperation projects. Cooperation projects would need to be reshuffled, so if it's a UK lead, the lead would need to be passed on to another European partner organisation, and the government guarantee would allow the UK organisations to, with their backpack of money, to hopefully still buy their way or their continued way into cooperation projects. Of course, this means conversations need to be had with the other European partners. in the project and to see whether that's something they're happy to work with. Most of the time, these projects are based on more than just transactional relationships, which Sarah and Sholeh will talk about a little bit later. This has happened in the past where partners have to leave projects or change, and this is not just a Brexit-specific scenario, but these kinds of partnerships usually outlast the worst type of weathers. So again, do keep up to date on this by looking at the Brexit guidance on our website. Speak to Julia, Megan, me, and if you are running a cooperation project at the moment, make sure you're in regular touch with us, but also talk it through with your rest of your partners. Transparency and communication is key. Again, something Sholeh and Sarah will probably mention later on. Right, Creative Europe. Creative Europe is not your average funding program. It has a program that has its own aims, objectives, and reasons for being there. It is not meant to or even allowed to replace national or regional or local arts, culture, or heritage funding. It is there to supplement your national, regional work and to extend it to a much wider European reach. It's essentially, the way that I like to promote it, a cooperation program and a collaboration program more than a funding program. The funding is there to further cooperation and not just to pay for art to be created, to be mobilized, and to be shared. So it is to extend work that you are planning on doing and to extend your work to a more international level. It is there to support organizations work outside of their countries, so what they call strengthening the sectors to operate transnationally. It is there for transnational circulation, so mobility of people, artists, curators, practitioners, but also content, performances, pieces of music, sculptures, anything cultural that can be made mobile. It is there to reach new audiences at home and abroad. It is there to encourage innovation, not just artistic innovation, but innovation also in terms of how big issues are tackled and how to work as organizations. It is also there to support policy and policy development. The results for the last cooperation projects round just came out several weeks ago, and the results are very good, and especially good for UK-based organizations. The writing is a little bit small for those at the back, so please feel encouraged to come a little bit closer and also closer to the fan. The highlights are that 32 UK organisations are involved in cooperation projects. 1 in 4 projects funded across the whole 41 countries involve a UK partner, and the UK was the most partnered country along with Germany, so tied first place in terms of the best represented country in these cooperation projects. And it's an increase of 25% from last year for UK organisations. This is a list of this year's laureates. Those organisations have been involved in will be involved in collaborative projects. And the ones in bold, if you can tell, that's Artreach for the large cooperation project, are the ones that are the leads on these cooperation projects, and the ones that are not in bold are partners in projects led by other European countries. So for the small cooperation projects, that's ACTA, The Place, Curated Place, D6 Culture, Full of Noises, Off-Centre Productions, Threshold Studios, Transform Theatre, University of Lincoln, and Walk the Plank. This is a tremendous success for North of England organisations, and I think is due to the extremely hard work that we've put in, and especially our colleague Steph over the last years, into activating North England-based organisations, and it really shows in terms of the leadership that these organisations have taken in these cooperative projects, and again shows the strength of these projects where so many rest of Europe partners are entrusting the lead of these projects to a UK organisation. So reasons to be cheerful and optimistic. These are results overall, so across the media sub-program and the culture sub-program. We have some fantastic graphs and stats and literature on our website, so I won't go through this, but it is all very good news. And I know we like to talk about the monetary value of the program, but what is really, really important, and Caroline's already mentioned it, is what lies behind the money and what the money is there to enable. So one could go in and say, oh, this is really just money, and this money should be easily replaceable in the case of a no-deal exit, for example, but these kinds of multilateral initiatives just are not replicable from any national level, and that is why these collaborative programs exist, because they aim for something that is a combined effort and delivers on more than the sum of the different parts. But again, that is very theoretical, and I think Sarah and Shirley will be able to explain what that actually means in practice. Again, more results, more numbers, but I will zip through these rather quickly. The numbers are good. The impacts, however, of these numbers are what we like to talk about just as much. Up to last year, and this doesn't include last month's results, UK organisations have partnered with 743 organisations in the rest of Europe. We got the other way around. And 42%, so almost 1 in 2 cooperation projects involved at least one UK partner. The countries for this year, and I say this year because it's a programme that grows. It begins, of course, with the EU member states, but it is open to non-EU countries as well. And this includes countries in the southern Mediterranean, the eastern Mediterranean, and there's usually a little bit of a grey background map to this, but it's a bit washed out. Countries that are eligible are almost all countries between here and Russia, so Ukraine is eligible as well. Most Western Balkan countries are eligible countries. And southern Mediterranean countries are also welcome to join. They're called the neighbourhood countries. And one of the latest additions to the programme in that region is Tunisia. So it's a much wider European look at Europe. Non-eligible countries can also participate as associate partners. So if you have a partner organisation that you really want to bring in, and they're based in the US or in Japan or in Brazil, you can do that. You can bring them in as an associate partner, and you can spend up to 1/3 of the project budget of a cooperation project on involving non-eligible rest of world artists and partner organizations, but you need to have the minimum number of eligible European partner organizations in the mix, and I'll get on to that a little bit later. So the culture sub-program has 4 main funding opportunities. The one that we'll be concentrating on today are the cooperation projects. This is where up to 80% of the sub-program's budget lies. This is really where the program comes into its own, and where I see the most value of the program lies in the cooperation projects. There's also support for literary translation. There's a funding opportunity that came around 3 times only for platforms and for networks. And I'll go through those very briefly in just a second. But it's a program that is open to all art forms, and it doesn't break it down into art forms. It is open to any organization, local authority, institution that is active in what is called the cultural or creative sectors, and therefore virtually every art form can be supported. And the more interesting ones are actually those that look at interdisciplinary art forms, or who take several art forms to respond to a joint theme or joint idea. The funding for European networks, as I said, only came around a couple of times, and this is really a sort of a business-to-business, professionals-to-professionals type of funding opportunity. It supports networks that support professionals in the sector, and these networks need to show a strong European dimension, and indeed they need to have at least 10 different European countries represented in their membership to be able to be co-funded by the program. Networks include, for example, Culture Action Europe, which some people call the network of networks. It's a policy and advocacy platform, and most European networks are actually a member of Culture Action Europe. ITM is one of the most well-known European networks, certainly in the performing arts. They cover theatre and dance. You can have theatre companies that are members, programming, venues, festivals, anyone working in performing arts. And they have over 500 members in over 50 countries, and that includes North America, Australia as well, so it's really wider than just Europe. Trans-Europe HAL is a network of cultural centres, mostly joined together by the fact that they are active in former industrial spaces. And then there's the European Jazz Network, which does exactly that. And there's a list of all Creative Europe-funded networks on our website. This is a really, really good resource because you can dive in and see what art forms are there, but also what networks might be representing across art forms. So, for example, education, arts education networks, or networks that work with young people across any art form. It's a really, really good way to find partners and to see which organizations have an interest in European working. All that and more on our website, which we are encouraged to say is an award-winning website. We may say this a few more times. European platforms. This is more of a business-to-consumer type of funding opportunity. It funds joint venues, spaces, and festivals who come together and agree to jointly program their spaces, their festivals, in order to present more and more diversely European content across their spaces, festivals, and venues. We have someone from Aerowave sitting in the room with us today. John, maybe you'll want to give a quick wave so everyone knows who you are. Do speak to John Ashford, about Aerowaves, which is one of the most long-standing fixtures in the Creative Europe program, and indeed several other programs that came before Creative Europe. Do you want to say a quick word about what Aerowaves do?
We're a dance network. We have a weekend platform in a different European city once a year, where we show 20 works, and we have 24 partners who select from that platform and present in their own countries those works. We're going for 23 years, so we predate all these schemes.
Also, Aberystwyth University hosts Literature Across Frontiers. Literature Across Frontiers is the other UK-based platform, and all of the other organisations and festivals and spaces are members in platforms run from other European countries. There's support for literary translation. Really quickly, if you are a publisher and you like to and enjoy translating rest of European literature into English, this will be your ticket. There will be one more deadline for this early next year, and that supports the translation of, as I said, rest of Europe literature, poetry, children's books, fiction, poetry, into English. Right, back to the cooperation projects. Cooperation projects, as I mentioned, are multilateral European partnerships. You go in as a network, a club, a consortium of like-minded organizations who each have at the heart of their mission collaborative working, and these projects will always be centered around a joint theme, an issue, or a problem that they as a partnership want to solve, address, or get to grips with and propose new solutions to. So within a cooperation project, yes, artistic creation is possible. You can commission new work. You can create new exhibitions. You can ask artists to respond to a central theme, question, or issue. You can run workshops. But what this is all about is creating the time, and the space in order to spend time together and jointly address these questions. And by working together over a number of years, there's the understanding that there would be a transfer of skills, of knowledge, of insight across professionals, artists, audiences as well, in order to, as I mentioned before, deliver on the big ambitions of Creative Europe, which are mobility, extending diversity. There are annual deadlines, and this is why we are here today. And as Julia said, we'll be ramping up our events over the next months, supporting organizations with their plans and with their ambitions, and encouraging everyone to have conversations with their rest of Europe friends, partners and colleagues with a view to possibly putting in a joint application later in the autumn. We expect the deadline to be around December, and the calls would be published around October, but do not wait for the calls to be published because the calls do not change much from one year to the next. You can already start preparing now. Two types of cooperation projects: the small ones, of which there are many, many more. They are the easiest access point into Creative Europe for the average organization. You need to have at least 3 partners from 3 different eligible countries in the mix. We recommend going in with one more than the minimum in case one of the partners needs to step out. You can apply for up to 200,000 euros, and you need to raise at least 40% of the overall project budget as a partnership. For the large cooperation projects, it's similar. You need at least 6 partners in 6 different countries, but because these are much larger in scale and in partnership, you can apply for up to 2 million euros, which is quite something, but that does also mean that you'd need to raise 2 million euros match funding if you went for the full 2 million amount, which you don't need to, but you can apply for up to 2 million. Now, the priorities of the cooperation projects remain largely the same and have remained the same since 2014. From time to time, an extra additional priority might be added in. In the past, this has been a priority, for example, around projects that also look at the integration of refugees. Another priority looking at the European Year of Cultural Heritage. So cultural heritage-minded projects were specifically well regarded. But the 3 central priorities are the mobility aspect, which I mentioned before, audience development, and capacity building in 3 different areas: digitization, new business models, and training and education. Now, this mobility is really important because it really underpins what this program is about. Mobility in itself, of course, is a good, useful, and a desirable thing, but what is key here is how you use the mobility and how you harness the possibility and the opportunity for mobility. So why is it that you would be sending 20 artists across 5 different countries? Is it just for them to be mobilized, or with the aim to find something or engage more with audiences, or in order to develop some tantalizing questions to some compelling questions across the different partner organizations? So you really need to think about the why and the what for in terms of this question of mobility. But this mobility aspect shouldn't be a difficult one to hit as a priority if you're going in as a cooperation project, because if you are working with at least 4 different partners in 4 different countries, this is just what you do. Audience development, again, this isn't just around increasing numbers of audiences, but this is much more about the process in how you engage audiences and participants within the process of a cooperation project. And this isn't just about presenting work to audiences, but it's how to engage participants, spectators, would be, could be, should be spectators and participants. So it can also be much more of an engagement minded project than just a presenting to type project. Capacity building, again, this is what I mentioned. If already you are working with artists, curators, professionals, technicians from and across different European countries, the ways of working, the cultures of working, the insights, the ways in which you engage with some really big questions in different countries might be profoundly different, but this kind of insight and that kind of understanding is this sort of magic dust of cooperation, I think. And again, I'll refer to Shola and to Sarah to talk about this a little bit more. But how are you going to harness the time that you're spending together? Of course, there is an understanding that we will learn from each other by working together. But in these kinds of projects, you can formalize this much more. You can frame this type of working together much better by running capacity development project workshops together. You can formalize these kinds of training and engagement much better. And indeed, it is really important that you do, so you can track, show, and demonstrate the value of putting 10 artists together in a room over a sustained period of time for them to work on a joint issue or theme. What is it you're getting out of this cooperation? So, as you'll see, this isn't your typical arts or culture funding. It's a way of working that is being supported rather than just the outputs and the performances and the fact that you've reached tens of thousands of participants and spectators across the 5 festivals that will have been involved in the project. It's the longer lasting impact. It's about how these projects aim to change and will have changed the sectors within which you're working. It's about answering a common question, grappling with this common issue, and developing joint and different responses to these shared challenges that we face in the sectors and art forms. And this is what a cooperation project is. I'll also very quickly mention Music Moves Europe. This is still in a pilot phase. It's an initiative by the European Commission to see how the program can support the music sector better, and there will be some more pilot calls coming out through Music Moves Europe over the next year, and it is hoped that the next Creative Europe program will have a dedicated music-minded program which supports along the value chain, so from the very early stages of music up to big platforms of distribution and mobility. So this is the program looking at big developments and opportunities, looking at online distribution, for example, the big successes of Swedish originated Spotify, and how this can help the European music sector compete with other music sectors around the world. There is also a new pilot mobility program called Pro Tunis. Pro Tunis, which I've recently found out is the Greek god of mobility. Make sure you get the spelling right on this. There is a website for it. They are on their 3rd call. You can apply as an individual artist for a period of mobility across any European country. And again, these are the 41 eligible European countries, so you can also apply to spend time in Ukraine, in Tunisia, in Iceland. And the 3rd call for this closes in just over 3 weeks. It's a very easy application process. And the plan is that this program becomes a dedicated program in the next Creative Europe program with what is called a dedicated budget line, and that means way more resources than at the moment. There have been a good number of UK-based artists who have been successful in their grants, and even more rest of Europe artists supported to come to the UK.